Afternoon. Just wanted to welcome you to our podcast. And my name is Pastor Michael. I'm the senior pastor here at Florence Methodist Church, and I'm here with Dr. Bill Arnold. Dr. Bill Arnold has a deep history with our church. His dad, Pete Arnold, served our church from 1976 to 1983.
That's correct.
And actually, Bill was on staff here for a summer as the youth minister.
That's correct.
And so Bill's going to be joining us on September 21st. He's going to be bringing the message that Sunday morning, but I wanted you all to meet Bill and get to know him a little bit. So, Bill, first of all, you're at Asbury Seminary.
That's
you
right.
teach Old Testament. Go ahead and give us your full title.
The full title, the Paul S. Amos Professor of Old Testament Interpretation.
Yes.
That's
I
a mouthful.
couldn't keep that straight in my head. I'm really
No
glad
reason
that
for you to keep that in your head at all.
Bill Arnold, Bill was a teacher of mine at Asbury and a longtime colleague.
Don't
and
hold that
friend.
against me.
Yeah, right. It's all his fault. And his mom was a big cheerleader of mine as well. And but Bill's been a great friend for a long time. And so I'm going to open it up and let Bill talk about his history and his parents' history with this church.
Well, first of all, it's an honor, Michael. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to being here in September for the service. Super honor for me, partly because of, as you said, our family history. My mother, who just died last year at the age of 94, spoke very lovingly and fondly of our years in Florence. I say ours. I was off in college for most of that time and was not really here that much. But she always spoke glowingly of the years that they had here from 76 to 83. The story she tells, I've heard her tell many times, was that when they first arrived in 1976, they were met by the treasurer that first week and said, "We're not sure we can pay your salary this month." The church was kind of in a bad way. And of course, this was before this new beautiful facility. It was in the older sanctuary, the older building. But things turned around right away, and they had great years here, a lot of growth, a lot of excitement. Dad poured himself into building the church as much as he could, and it grew. My mother taught a Bible school, a Sunday school class, which I don't know if it's still called Pairs and Spares class, but that's what it was called back in those days. I don't know how people who were spares felt about being in the Pairs and Spares class, but Mom taught that class for many years, and a lot of young adults in that class in those years. And so the church had growth, and I think we always looked back and took some pride in that and felt that maybe God was using that in a way to prepare for what happened after Dad left here in 1983 to become a district superintendent in the church. So that then followed by Buskirk and then Owen Dolan and this building of this new facility. And so I think my mother, all the way up until her dying day last year, felt like that was a great time of service in the church, and grateful that the church was so strong and seems to be doing so well now. And it certainly is an impressive facility. I'm proud of this church today. Yeah. So as you say, I was on staff. I don't know if that's what you would say. I mean, I was between.
Paid.
Yeah, well, I think I got paid. I don't know. Dad was the pastor, so I was between my junior and senior year in college, and came home, and they didn't have a youth pastor, and I sort of became the youth pastor, and just for that summer. And I remember taking kids to camp and doing Bible studies for them, and I think that was a good experience for me too. And so, yeah, we have great friends from those years still, after all these years. I was sharing with you earlier, I've performed a wedding for a member of the Toadvine family, and we still would hear from the Dixons through Mom and Dad when they were still with us. Dad died in 2015 at the age of 92, and my mother passed away last year at the age of 94. So they cherished those 7 years they had in Florence a lot.
Right. So, as a professor of Old Testament, I think our experience with those who get in the academic world, they, with their research, they tend to lose their faith. So, how have you kept your faith and your research in your academic studies? How have you kept that balanced?
Part of the difficulty, I think, is that people tend to make a division between academic and rigorous study of the Bible. and maybe we will call it devotional reading of the Bible. And I think that's a huge mistake. Doesn't matter how rigorous I am in my reading of secondary literature, or if I'm, I teach Old Testament, I'd like to teach Hebrew grammar. So if I'm parsing verbs from Hebrew or doing syntax and translating, I think all of that is devotional. And I think I do have, there's a danger of people sort of bifurcating the two and saying they're going to just do academic study of the Bible rather than reading it for its intent. What's the intent of the Bible is for communication with God, revelation of God's personhood and his desire to have relationship with us. So if we separate that out, then we lose really the whole point of the Bible and the point of reading the Bible. So keeping them together is critical. I don't find it hard to do. I think it's a natural thing to do, but you're right. There are some who get into the academics who sort of lay aside or separate out their faith from their scholarship, and I find that to be problematic.
And you are an ordained elder.
Yes.
In the Global Methodist Church.
I am.
And how has Wesleyanism helped affect your your faith journey?
Well, that relates to the previous question that we were just talking about. John and Charles, his brother, both were examples of how to hold faith and study together. I mean, John Wesley was an Oxford Don, which means he was like an adjunct professor at Oxford University. He taught Greek and Koine Greek, New Testament Greek at Oxford. But he was also an evangelist, sort of a social worker, social reformer, built orphanages. And I mean, he was very much involved in expressions of his Christian faith. At the same time, he was involved in the academics. So as a Wesleyan Arminian thinker and believer, that helps not to separate the academics from devotional reading. But also, I think it enriches all of my reading of the Bible because I see it through eyes of the synergism between God and humans. God doesn't override our free will. He encourages us to love Him of our own free will, and that's a big part of who we are too. I mean, Methodism. That's partly why I am who I am. I mean, I was born and raised in the Methodist tradition.
Right.
Cut my teeth on the back of a Methodist pew. This is who I am, and so that's also a big part of what makes that possible.
So, if being a teacher of the Old Testament, why is it important for today's Christians to read that first part of the Bible?
Well, the first part of the Bible, you mean the 78.3% of the Bible? It's not only the first part, it's the great majority of the Bible. Frankly, we can't understand the New Testament at all unless we first understand the Old Testament. We have to read them from beginning to end. You have to start at the beginning to get to the book of Revelation with any kind of understanding at all. And there are lots of examples through history where heresies or wrong doctrines and hurtful thinking have happened where people neglected the Old Testament or tried to cut it out of their Bibles. So I tell students that I like the New Testament. I have read it. I like it. It reminds me of the Old Testament. It's the part at the back near the maps. I find it there, and it's very helpful. So the Bible is largely the Old Testament.
Right.
And what's new about the New? Well, there's really nothing new about the New. Maybe there's a little bit new, but it's newly stated. But so I think, I don't know if you were in the class where I did this, but I talk about the great doctrines of the church and have students try to list them all out. And whether it starts with the Trinity or incarnation or forgiveness, repentance. And then I ask them, where in the Bible are these doctrines explained and spelled out? And invariably, they're explained in the Old Testament and assumed in the New. So when you start reading the New Testament, the authors of the New Testament are assuming you already know those things, and you've already read that part. Even the hard bits like Leviticus and the nature of atonement, the nature of sacrifice, the nature of forgiveness. These are things the New Testament assumes you know because you've read the book of Leviticus and other parts of the Old Testament too. But I pick on Leviticus because that's the one that people love to ignore. Yeah,
that and Numbers.
Well, that and Numbers. Yeah, those are the two that people like to skip over.
Right.
Can't skip them.
No, you can't skip them. They're all apart. So, do you care to give us a little bit of a trailer for your sermon?
Oh, a trailer, a little teaser, yeah.
Little teaser.
Well, along the lines of the importance of the Old Testament, I'm going to be talking about the very first words of the Bible, Genesis 1, even the first few verses of Genesis. There is a rabbinic saying, this is not part of the sermon, but I'll share that here. There's an old rabbinic saying that all beginnings are difficult. Kol hatichahot kashot, all beginnings are hard. And that's because it's hard to start a novel, it's hard to start a new endeavor, it's hard to start anything new. So what about the opening verses of the Bible, which seem so, on the one hand, simple, but are so hard to get our minds wrapped around them and are often the source of great controversy. And yet, they're also critical for understanding the rest of the Bible. So I'll be preaching a sermon on just the opening 3 or 5 verses of the Bible and how that's important for the rest of the story.
Okay, so if you want to hear more about that, come September 21st, Bill will be joining us, and we can't wait to have him join us on that Sunday morning. And it's such a pleasure to sit down with you and let the congregation get to know you. And we thank you, Michael, so much.
It's great. I look forward to it.
And we'll see you all this coming Sunday.